I still remember the day I found the notice taped to my door. It was folded so tightly, like whoever left it wanted to make sure I struggled to open it. The paper was crisp and official looking, with that HOA letterhead at the top. But the second I read the first line, my stomach twisted. Unapproved structure in violation of community guidelines. At first, I thought maybe it was a mistake. I hadn't built anything, hadn't put up a new fence, hadn't parked an RV in the driveway like some people had. But as I kept reading, my jaw dropped. They were calling out my garden. Not just any garden, my little veggie patch in the corner of the backyard. A small square of raised beds with a few tomato plants, some peppers, and one stubborn row of carrots that never grew straight. It was nothing fancy, nothing wild, just something I'd built with my kids, Ethan and Lily, during the summer when school was out. To us, it wasn't just vegetables. It was ours. It was Saturday mornings with our hands in the dirt, Lily giggling when she found a worm, Ethan pretending he was plant boss and directing me where the seeds should go. It was messy, imperfect, but it was family. And now, apparently, it was a threat to property values. That's when I saw her signature at the bottom of the page. Karen Mitchell, the HOA president. Now, let me tell you something about Karen. If you've ever lived in a neighborhood with an HOA, you already know the type. Perfectly trimmed hedges, blinds that snap shut the moment she sees anyone on the street, and a smile that never quite reaches her eyes. Karen had been looking for a fight with me ever since I moved in. When I painted my front door blue, she sent me a warning letter that it wasn't in harmony with the neighborhood aesthetic. When I put up a bird feeder, she claimed it attracted pests. I swear, if I sneezed too loudly, she'd probably send me a noise violation. But this time, she had crossed a line. Because this wasn't about paint colors or birdseed. This was about my kids. You see, that garden wasn't just my idea. It started one spring when Lily's kindergarten teacher gave every child a little seedling and a plastic cup, a single bean sprout with a popsicle stick taped to it. Lily had been so proud, carrying it home like it was treasure. She named it Beanie. She asked me, eyes wide, "Can we plant Beanie in our yard so it can grow big?" How could I say no? That little sprout became the start of something bigger. We built one small wooden bed, then another, until the corner of the yard turned into a colorful patch of life. Tomatoes, peppers, beans, and most importantly, memories. And now, apparently, Karen was telling me to rip it all out. I crumpled the paper in my hand. I could feel heat rising in my chest. The kind that comes when you know something isn't just unfair, it's wrong. That night at dinner, I tried to keep my voice steady as I explained it to the kids. They say we can't have the garden anymore, I told them softly. Ethan slammed his fork down. "That's so stupid! It's just plants!" Lily's eyes welled up. But Beanie lives there. And that's when my heart broke. Because I wasn't fighting for some vegetables. I was fighting for them. I thought maybe I could reason with Karen. Maybe this was all a misunderstanding. So the next day, I marched right up to her house, 3 doors down, where her lawn looked like it belonged in a magazine, not a neighborhood. She opened the door with that same tight smile. "Yes," she said, tilting her head like she was already bored. I held up the notice. This has to be a mistake. It's just a little garden." Karen crossed her arms. Rules are rules. The bylaws clearly state that unapproved structures are not permitted. That includes raised beds. It's a garden, Karen. A small one. My kids... She cut me off with a sharp laugh. Your personal activities can't take priority over community property values. If you wanted farmland, you should have moved to the country. That line, I'll never forget it. Because that's when I realized this wasn't about a garden. This was about power. I walked home that day with my fists clenched and my jaw set. And as I watched Lily watering her little bean plant, whispering encouragements to it like it could hear her, something hardened inside me. I wasn't going to let Karen win. But what I didn't know was that things were about to get much, much worse. Because the next HOA meeting, it turned into a battlefield. The night of the HOA meeting, I felt like I was walking into enemy territory. The clubhouse sat at the end of the cul-de-sac, its fluorescent lights buzzing like a courtroom waiting for judgment. I had Ethan and Lily stay home with my sister. I didn't want them to see what was about to happen. I knew it was going to get ugly. When I pushed open the door, the room was already full. Neighbors lined up in metal folding chairs, papers rustling in their laps, voices murmuring in low, tense tones. At the front of the room sat the HOA board, 5 people in a neat row behind a long table. And in the middle, like a queen on her throne, sat Karen Mitchell. She had her binder open, tabs sticking out in a rainbow of colors, her reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked up the moment I walked in, and the corners of her mouth lifted into that smug little smile that always made me want to scream. I took a seat near the middle, trying to stay calm. Karen tapped her gavel lightly. This meeting will now come to order. The first few agenda items were boring. Budget updates, neighborhood watch patrols, the usual. I barely heard them. My heart was pounding too loud in my ears because I knew my name was next. And then it came. Karen cleared her throat. Now, regarding the unapproved structure at 312 Westfield Drive. Every head in the room turned toward me. I could feel the heat on my skin. I swallowed hard, stood up, and raised my hand. It's not an unapproved structure, I said firmly. It's a small vegetable garden in my backyard, built with my kids. It's not hurting anyone. Karen adjusted her glasses and gave me a condescending look. Rules are rules, Miss Carter. The bylaws clearly state. Karen, it's tomatoes and beans. Not a barn, not a shed, just plants. And that's when something surprising happened. A voice spoke up from the back. I don't see the problem with a garden. It was Mr. Thompson, the older man who always walked his golden retriever around the block at sunrise. He leaned forward in his chair, his voice steady. I grew up with gardens. Never hurt property values then. Why should it now? A murmur rippled through the crowd. Karen's smile faltered for a moment. Then she banged the gavel again. The issue here is uniformity. We must preserve a certain standard. If we allow one person to build a garden, what's next? Chickens? Farm equipment in the yard? I could feel my face flush with anger. It's not a farm, Karen. It's my children's bean plant. It's memories. You're turning something beautiful into a crime. And then another voice. Yeah, Karen, what's the harm? It was Maria, the mom from across the street. My daughter plays over there sometimes. She loves helping water the plants. It's good for kids. Karen's jaw tightened. She scanned the room like she was losing her grip, like the control was slipping through her fingers. This isn't up for debate. The garden must be removed. A violation fine will be issued if compliance is not met within 30 days. The room erupted. People started talking over one another. Some nodded at Karen, others shook their heads in disbelief. Phones came out, neighbors recording, whispering, sharing looks. I stood up straighter, my voice rising above the noise. If you find me, find me. But I'm not tearing down something that brings joy to my family and half the kids in this neighborhood. You can take me to court if you want. That's when the tension hit its peak. Karen slammed the gavel down again and again, her face red. Order! Order! This meeting is adjourned. But the damage was already done. Because as I walked out of that clubhouse, I saw something I didn't expect. Neighbors nodding at me, whispering encouragement, giving small smiles. And one woman leaned close and whispered as I passed, "Don't back down. We're with you." That's when I realized this wasn't just my fight anymore. The garden had become something bigger. But what I didn't know then was how far Karen would go to try to crush me, and how one little birthday party was about to turn this whole neighborhood into a war zone. A week after the meeting, life at home felt uneasy. I watered the tomatoes with Lily every morning, but I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were on us. Neighbors peeking from behind blinds, waiting to see if I'd cave. And then came Lily's 7th birthday. She had been talking about it for months. She didn't want a party at the trampoline park or the pool like other kids. No, my daughter wanted something different. She wanted a garden birthday. "Mom," she said one evening, her little hands cupped together, "all I want is to plant my own seed, my very own plant, just for me." Her voice was so sweet, so innocent, that my chest tightened. I promised she could, and I meant it. So, on the morning of her birthday, I set up balloons by the fence, laid out a picnic table in the grass, and invited a handful of neighborhood kids. We had lemonade, cupcakes, and little pots of soil lined up like treasure. Each child could plant a seed. But Lily's was special. I gave her a small clay pot with her name painted in purple letters across it. Inside was a tiny bean seed. She held it like it was magic. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," I whispered, hugging her tight. "This is the start of something big." The kids laughed, scooped dirt with their fingers, patted it down with proud little hands. Parents stood around chatting, some even smiling at the sight. It felt normal, happy, like the neighborhood I used to believe in. Until Karen showed up. She didn't come with balloons or gifts. She came with her clipboard. I saw her marching across the lawn in her pressed blouse, lips pursed so tight they were almost invisible. My stomach dropped. "Excuse me," she announced loudly, as if she was the guest of honor. "What is going on here?" The music stopped. Conversations froze. "It's my daughter's birthday," I said carefully, keeping my voice calm. "We're just planting seeds." Karen's eyes flicked to the pots, then to the garden behind me. Her nostrils flared. "You're expanding it?" she accused. "No," I said firmly. "It's just a birthday activity for the kids. Nothing more." But Karen wasn't having it. She pulled out her phone, snapping pictures of the kids holding their pots. One of the parents, Maria, stepped forward. "Karen, seriously, they're kids. This is wholesome. Let them be." Karen turned on her like a snake. "Wholesome? This is a violation of our bylaws, and I won't allow it." Lily tugged at my hand, her little eyes wide. "Mom, is she taking my plant away?" That moment, those words, lit a fire in me I can't describe. I crouched down, hugged Lily tight, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "No one is taking your plant away. Not today, not ever." The parents started murmuring, some pulling out their phones again. Karen noticed, and her face grew even redder. "This will go on record. You are deliberately defying HOA regulations. You're setting a dangerous precedent for the neighborhood." But here's the thing. By trying to humiliate me, she ended up humiliating herself, because Maria grabbed a cupcake, raised it like a toast, and said, "Here's to Lily and her garden." Everyone clapped. Kids laughed. Phones caught it all. And Karen? She stormed away, furious, muttering about legal consequences. That night, I sat on my porch, watching Lily's little pot resting by the fence. She had tucked it into the soil with care, watering it with her tiny pink watering can. And as I watched her smile, I realized something powerful. This wasn't just about vegetables. This wasn't even about property values. This was about dignity, about community, about letting something small and good grow, even when someone tried to stomp it out. But Karen wasn't done with me, not by a long shot, because 2 days later, a letter came in the mail, a fine, bigger than I ever seen. And at the bottom, in bold print, it read, "Failure to comply will result in a mandatory hearing." The letter burned a hole in my kitchen counter for 2 straight days. Mandatory hearing. Those 2 words kept echoing in my head like a drum beat. I'd never been inside the HOA clubhouse for anything other than the annual Christmas raffle. Now I was being dragged there like some criminal over a child's birthday seedling. The night before the hearing, Lily asked me, "Mom, will they take my plant away?" I tried to smile, tried to sound confident. "No, sweetheart, we're going to fight for it." But deep down, I was terrified. By the time the day arrived, I had barely slept. I pulled into the parking lot, and my jaw dropped. The clubhouse was packed. Cars lined the street. People weren't just showing up to watch. They were gathering like it was an event. Some held Tupperware containers, others balanced crock pots. And then I realized it was Maria's idea. She had rallied the neighborhood to turn this hearing into something else, a potluck. "Hey, Rachel," she called, waving me over. "If they're going to make us sit through a circus, we might as well eat." Tables had been set up outside, covered in homemade dishes: mac and cheese, potato salad, chili, cornbread. It smelled like a county fair. Kids ran around with plates, neighbors laughed, people hugged. For the first time in weeks, the air felt light, alive, united. But then the doors opened, and there she was, Karen Mitchell. Clipboard clutched like a weapon, heels clicking against the tile, chin high as if she were leading a parade. The crowd quieted, tension snapping back like a rubber band. Inside the clubhouse, the atmosphere was electric. Phones were out. Everyone was recording. I sat at the front table, Lily beside me with her little plant in her lap, as if it were evidence in a trial. Karen cleared her throat. "We are here today to address a serious violation of HOA guidelines. This so-called community garden," someone corrected loudly from the back. Karen glared. "This violation is bringing down our property values, and as president, I am obligated to enforce the bylaws." I stood up slowly. My knees shook, but my voice was steady. "With respect, Karen, this isn't just about a garden. It's about people, about community, and about a little girl who wanted to grow something beautiful." Lily clutched my hand, whispering, "Go, Mom." Karen scoffed. Emotions don't rewrite rules. Facts do. That's when Maria marched forward with a casserole dish in her hands, like it was Exhibit A. She set it down on the table with a loud clunk. This, she said, was made with vegetables from that garden. The room gasped, then erupted in applause. One by one, neighbors started stepping forward, each holding food they had made with our little patch of soil. Salsa, salads, bread, even a jug of fresh lemonade. This garden brings us together. This garden feeds our families. This garden is worth more than any fine. It was like a tidal wave, and Karen was drowning. Her face turned scarlet, her voice shaking now. This is not how official hearings are conducted. This is highly irregular. But the phones kept rolling. The comments online were already exploding. I could see people scrolling, laughing, cheering. And then the moment that sealed it. Lily, my 7-year-old, stood up on her chair. Her little voice rang out over the crowd. Please don't take my plant away. It's not just a plant. It's my dream. The room fell silent. You could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights above us. Even Karen froze. And then, as if on cue, everyone started chanting, "Let it grow! Let it grow!" Karen slammed her clipboard shut, her composure finally cracking. "This isn't over," she hissed, before storming out of the room. But it was. At least for that night it was. Because the people had spoken, and the garden wasn't just a patch of dirt anymore. It was a movement. As I carried Lily home, her little pot still in her arms, I knew one thing for certain. Karen had underestimated us. She thought this was about vegetables. But it was about roots. And ours were just getting started. The HOA clubhouse had never been this full. Neighbors packed every chair, lining the walls, standing in the back, even spilling out into the hallway. And almost every single one of them had their phone out, recording. This wasn't just a meeting anymore. It was a show. Karen sat at the center of the board's long table, shoulders stiff, lips pressed tight. She wore a blazer sharper than her glare, trying to project authority. But no matter how polished she looked, you could see it. The cracks of desperation. I took my seat at the podium, hands shaking just slightly. I had rehearsed my words 100 times, but nothing could prepare me for the weight of all those eyes. The meeting began the same way it always did. Roll call, financials, the boring stuff. But everyone knew why they were there. Finally, Karen leaned into her mic. Item number 7, the complaint against Rachel Carter for disruptive conduct. The room went dead silent. I stood, my voice surprisingly steady. With all due respect, Karen, I think the real complaint here isn't about disruption. It's about change. You don't like that the neighborhood is coming together without your permission. Gasps rippled across the room. Karen smirked, pouncing. You admit it then? You've been inciting this circus? Property values are dropping, Rachel. People across the country are mocking us. And that was it. The opening I had been waiting for. I leaned forward, my voice calm but sharp enough to cut. No, Karen. People across the country are cheering for us. They're cheering for a little girl who just wanted to grow a plant. They're cheering for neighbors who stood up for each other. The only one they're mocking is you. Phones shot higher into the air. You could feel the electricity in the room. Karen's face flushed red, her hands slamming the table. This is out of order. But before she could regain control, Tom Reynolds, the quiet board member, leaned into his mic again. I move that we dismiss this complaint. And furthermore, I moved that we amend the HOA bylaws to permit community gardens. The room erupted. Cheers, applause, even a few tears. Karen shouted over the noise, but it was useless. The board voted, one by one, hands raised, until it was official. The garden was saved, and my name was cleared. Karen sat frozen, eyes darting, realizing her reign was over. And then Lily did something I'll never forget. She tugged at my sleeve, asking softly, "Can I say something?" I lifted her up to the mic. Her little voice echoed through the room, innocent and pure. "Thank you for letting me grow my plant. I promise I'll share it with everyone." The room fell completely silent for a heartbeat. And then applause so loud it shook the walls. Phones live streamed the moment across the internet, and by the next day, that clip alone had millions of views. A little girl's promise undoing months of bitterness. Karen? She resigned a week later, packed up her blazer, her rules, and her pride, and disappeared from the board. The garden? It grew, bigger than ever. Neighbors added raised beds, painted murals, and even installed a little free veggie stand at the entrance. It became the pride of the neighborhood, a symbol of what happens when people choose community over control. And me? I never set out to be a leader. I was just a mom trying to help my daughter plant something in the dirt. But maybe that's the point. Change doesn't always start with grand plans or big speeches. Sometimes it starts with something as small as a seed. And when you water it with enough love, stubbornness, and maybe a little bit of spite, it grows into something bigger than you could ever imagine.